Kia ora, my name is Tina Ngata and I live in Ruatoria, which is about 2 hours north of Gisborne. I'm very sorry I couldn't be with you today to present in person. I guess a part of why I'm not able to be there with you today to present in person is related to what I need to speak with you about. Unfortunately, the very poor roads that we have up the East Coast take a big toll on our vehicles. It means that we up the coast who already live in very high deprivation areas have to spend significantly more money maintaining our vehicles, and even when we do, they can still have issues because of the strain placed upon them by driving our roads. Quite separate from the fact that most of the meetings that we have to attend in order to have input at a local government level usually occur in Gisborne, so we have to take that road often if we want to be active in our local government decisions. Those kinds of issues are just a scratch on the surface of some of the challenges that we face living in rurally isolated areas in the Gisborne district. And it's those kinds of challenges that we know from lived experience over generations now, that those who live in the city are not able to keep at the forefront of their minds when they make their decisions for our district. Largely, the decisions that are made for our district are made with Gisborne City in mind, not necessarily with the needs of our more rurally isolated areas. What we have been able to achieve with the minimal representation that we have had, we're very thankful for. But that again brings us back to some of the concerns that we have with the new representative model. The new representative model will obviously be based on population distribution, with the councils, with all of the new councillors to be voted in at large across the entire region. Because of the population distribution concentration in Gisborne City, that means that we are left highly vulnerable in our rurally isolated areas of losing that small amount of representation that we have. And I say that because the community boards, which we were cautiously optimistic about, are still quite small, but also we have no indication from council yet around what kind of modality those boards will have between them and council. So we don't know what teeth they'll have essentially, whether or not they will wind up being glorified advisory committees, or if they will actually have some level of access to resources, or how their decisions will impact upon resource allocation or policy development. So without that information, unfortunately, we don't feel confident enough in supporting this change, because it looks to us as if we are very vulnerable to losing what little representation we do have. Now, the nature of that representation is very important to us, and we already feel that we haven't been able to really have a strong discussion around what that could look like. I'm just going to share a couple of slides here. So if you have a look at our ethnic distribution here in Te Tairawhiti, across the East Coast, our Māori population is 48.9% across the Gisborne district, which is quite unique. We have a very densely populated area, but further up around the East Cape, it's actually 88%. And if you're in Tokomaru Bay, it's actually 83.7%. And if you're in Ruatoria, where I live, you're looking at a 93.5% Māori population. So we have very valid interests in wanting to have the discussion around Māori wards, and that discussion was taken away from us by council. So they actually made the decision in 2017 that it would not be put on the table for discussion, and then subsequently they've reported that that because there was no demand for it, that it wasn't going to be pursued any further, and that it may be discussed again in 2020. But of course, we never had the opportunity to discuss it, so we never had the opportunity to demand it. But I would say that it's actually very misrepresentative to say that we didn't demand it. We have a clear interest in it. Our population levels justify that discussion, and so we're very disappointed that the Māori wards discussion was not socialised and was not put up for a broad discussion across our community. And what we're left with now is an opportunity to maybe improve our representation, but also maybe lose our representation. And you know, some of those issues impact upon us in the most severe of ways. So if you have a look here, you're looking at a map of our road safety risk along State Highway 35. We take significant risks every single time we want to travel down to Gisborne. And in fact, if it's late and raining at the moment, it can take up to 3 hours to take a road that used to take around about an hour and 15 or an hour and a half to drive. So, and if you have a look over here, the State Highway 35 from Opotiki to Tokomaru Bay has been highlighted as a very high risk road. These are some of the areas, and of course our infrastructural development. We consistently have power outages. We have only just received high-speed fibre broadband, but of course, with being in a high deprivation area, not many people can afford to access it. So, I mean, we have significant challenges on the coast, challenges that require and deserve our own representation. And without a clear indication from Council around how our representation will be enhanced through this new model, we unfortunately can't support it. And so, I mean that I'm speaking for myself, but I also, and I have been allowed to give this presentation on behalf of Hilton Collier, and I know that there aren't many people speaking in person, if any, from up the coast, and so I hope you will hear our voice today, that the people of the East Cape, Ruatoria, Tokomaru Bay, and you know Uawa Tawhiti as well, we deserve guaranteed representation of our interests, and we are suffering through lack of representation of our interests. And so we would ask the Commission to hold off on approving the new model until we have that clear information that this will actually guarantee us representation and not wind up diminishing our representation through having a lack of power or impact through these community boards. Tēnā koutou.